Welcome to the class project. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be using everything that we've learned so far. So the perspective, the value, and the composition in order to create 4 drawings. These are going to be nice and simple drawings in order to get used to the process that I like to use. So we're going to be starting off by perspective and visualizing the object that we are going to be drawing on the page. And then we're going to use composition to making sure it's balanced and there's enough unity between all the elements on the page. And then to create contrast, we're going to be adding value to the full drawing by selecting a light source, using the knowledge and information that we learned in the lighting section of this class in order to add the values in the correct place, adding contrast to. This is going to be great for you as understanding this process of how to visualize something before you start drawing and then seeing it slowly come together is going to be really great for all the new projects, the new drawings that you'll be doing in the future. What I'll be doing is we've got 4 prompts in which we'll be working through each one slowly in order to get you used to the whole process. The process breakdown that I like to use is a 10-step process, which I'll be running through each one step by step. Let me just give you a quick overview of what these 10 steps are. So firstly, we're going to decide what we want to feel and how we want to look before we start drawing. Secondly, we break down what we're drawing into the simple components such as a cylinder, a cube. Then we like to start drawing, so we're drawing the basic shapes. Once we've drawn the basic shapes and the framing, let's go in and add some details. And then fifth, I like to add some other elements to make it feel balanced and making sure the whole drawing feels unified. Now what I like to do is to choose a light source. Then what we'll be doing is using the reference images which we created in the lighting class to use this as a guide of how we're going to light and add values to this drawing. Then what we're doing is adding in the basic values but deciding where the highlights and the shadows should be. I'll go in and add a cast shadow, and then finally I just like to finish off with some detail. So this is an overview of the steps that we'll be taking in order to make sure we go from the idea to the drawing. Let's just get straight into it. Okay, so the 4 prompts that we're going to be using for this lesson, we have firstly a mushroom, we've got a block of cheese, we've got an ice cream and an ice cream cone, and then we're finally ending with a cactus. The reason why I've chose these is because these are very simple things which are made up of very simple shapes which we've covered in this lesson. So I'm going to split this piece of paper up into 4 and then we're going to draw all 4 on this piece of paper. Okay, so I'll split my piece of paper up. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to go through each one. I'm going to walk you through all the 10 steps which I discussed in the intro, and I'm going to show you how I apply this to the drawing. So I'm going to start off firstly with the mushroom. So in my head what I'm thinking about is with a mushroom, it's made up of 2 shapes. 2 main shapes you've got. So you've got a cylinder which makes up the stalk, and then you've got a sphere which is cut in half. This is a basic breakdown of a mushroom. So what I'm going to be doing now is I'm going to be drawing this with this understanding. So first I need to decide where I want the mushroom to be. So do I want to be looking down on it? Do I want to be looking up, or do I want it to be straight ahead? So for this, I want to be looking up at the mushroom. So taking in mind what we learned in the perspective lesson, when we're looking up at something, we need the vertical lines to be converging to give the illusion that we're looking up at this mushroom. So what I'm going to do first, I'm going to start by putting in a center line. And now what I'm going to be doing is drawing lines either side to make it look like it's converging. So I'm just putting in some guides. And remember, turn your page as you're drawing these straight lines. So these guides just have to be light, because as we're building upon this, we'll be adding more and more detail. So don't worry too much about making it really dark initially. So the second thing that we learned was the further from the horizon line that we are, the more open the oval is. I'm going to go in and just draw myself an oval. And then because we're looking up, I want this to be the ground, so I'm not going to close that side. Okay, so now for this section of the mushroom. So if we think about it, it is a sphere. So I'm going to start by drawing a big circle, and then what we learned in the mesh lesson, where we broke down the shape, we're going to use that in order to cut the shape in half. Okay, I'm happy with that. Good thing with the mushroom is it's not completely round on top, so it doesn't matter if the circle isn't perfect for this. So now what we're going to do is we're going to draw in a center line. So this is where the mushroom will interact. And now what I'm going to do is using this shape, but imagine I'm scaling it up and enlarging it. So now we have a very basic guide built in. So what I'm going to do now is go in and start drawing in a little bit more detail to kind of build out the mushrooms. I know this is a stalk, so with a mushroom, it doesn't really have to be super smooth. This is where your imagination can kind of creep in. But this is just the guide of the skeleton, as we talked about in the initial part of this lesson, where we need to have a strong skeleton in order for our drawings to make sense. So I'm just going to go in and make it a little bit more clearer. Okay, so there we have a very basic shape of the mushroom. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to go in and start adding some other elements before I start filling in the details and the values in this mushroom. So because we're looking up at the mushroom, the ground isn't going to be visible as much, but also because all the lines are converging upwards, what I'm going to do is add a little bit more detail around the outside to kind of emphasize the fact that we're looking up. So because of that, all the vertical lines will be like this. So I'm going to go in and add in some rough shapes. So as you can see, just by the learning that we did in this lesson, we'll be able to capture and create something quite dynamic just by using 3-point perspective, basic shapes, and just basic understanding of how the lines converge. Okay, so now we've got a very good skeleton. What we're going to do now is we're going to choose our light source. So before this, I'm just going to go in and clean up the sketch a little. Okay, so there we have our sketch. So now I'm going to choose a light source. So in our example, there was one where we had the light source coming in from the top left. So because of this, using the reference images that we created in the first lesson, so from the cylinder and the sphere, what we're going to do is we're going to use these as reference in order to add value to this. So from the reference images, we know that this section here, I'm just going to do some very faint lights. So I'm going to do some very faint lines. So this section here will be really light, this section here will be dark, and this will be the transition between the two values. And then with the sphere, it looked like there was a curve for where the light would be. So this section here would all be light, and then this section would be dark, and then there'd be a slight light bit on this side here. So now I'm just going to go in and add the values. And now what we're going to do is, because the mushroom, the bottom section of it, we're going to create a little lip, and then because it's going to be quite dark because the light's coming from above, we're just going to go in and create an extremely dark value on the inside of this mushroom. So we got a very basic, so we've got the very basic values added to this mushroom. So now what I'm going to do is just add a little bit more detail to the shadows, darkening certain areas and then leaving certain areas white. So one thing to bear in mind is, because the light's coming from here, this section of the mushroom is going to be casting a shadow on this stalk, as the light won't pass until it gets around here. So this section here would all be in shadow as well. So I'm going to go in and add a slightly darker value here. And now to end with some final details, with the extra details that I put on the side, I'm just going to go in, add some details to this. Feel free to add any other details. You can add a moon, you can add some stars. Okay, so there's the mushroom. So what we're going to do now is move on to a block of cheese. Okay, so this block of cheese, firstly, like we said before, we need to decide, how do we want this block of cheese to look? Do we want to be looking down at it? Do we want to be looking straight ahead? Do we want to be looking to the right or the left? So for this one, we're going to be looking down on the block of cheese. So for this, we need to create ourselves a cube. And then from that, we'll build the block of cheese within that cube. So like what we learned previously, we want both the lines to be converging on either side. Okay, so there we've got our cube. What I'm going to be doing now is building this in. So with the block of cheese, I want it to be a 3D triangle. So this section here, I'm going to keep full, because normally there's like a slight round, because it's generally cut from a cheese wheel. And then this section down here is going to be pointy. And then same for this section. So this side is going to be pointy, and then so is this. So I'm just going to join these two lines together. And there we go, we can see the block of cheese slowly coming together. So what I'm going to do now is just add a little bit more detail. So I'm just going to add a few holes just to kind of make it a little bit interesting. So I'm happy with that. So before I go further, I'm just going to remove the guidelines of the cube just so I can see the block of cheese a lot more clearer. Okay, so there's our block of cheese. So now we need to decide on where we want the light source to come from. So for this, I'm going to have the light source coming in from this direction. So because we can only see two faces, this one's going to be a lot more simpler. So this section is going to be lighter, and then this section is going to be in the shade because the light's coming from here. So I'm just going to go in and shade this whilst leaving the circles a little open. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to darken this top section just to kind of make the line between the two edges stand out a lot more. Okay, that's that. Now what I'm going to do is let's add some detail by making the holes a lot darker. So because the hole's going that way, this section of the hole is going to be a lot darker than this section. So I'm just going to create a slight gradient. What I'm going to do is going to make this side a little bit more darker and increase the contrast on this side by making the values a little darker too. So because the light is coming from this section, we're going to have this side of the cheese a lot more darker compared to this side. And now to make this convincing, let's go in and add our cast shadow. So because we've got the light coming in from this side, like we said, it's going to be a lot further off the page. So if you imagine it, there's going to be a line coming out like so. So I'm gonna make this quite a soft shadow because we've created a low contrast image here. So I'm gonna make this section dark and then have it fade out gradually. So there we have the block of cheese. Okay, for the next one is going to be an ice cream cone. So to break this down, we have two simple shapes again. We've got a cone and we've got a sphere. So let's go in and build these shapes. So for this one, I want to be looking down at the ice cream. So let's go in and start building this. So again, like before, I'm going to go in and add a center line in. And now I'm going to start by drawing the cone. So because I want to be looking down at it, we're going to be able to see the top face. So I'm going to go add in a perpendicular line first for where I want the top of the cone to be. And because there's a cone, both lines are going to converge to a point. And now let's draw the top face of the cone. And now for the ice cream in itself. So because we're looking down on it, actually firstly I want this to be a little bit more wider because we are looking down on this cone. And because an ice cream isn't perfectly spherical, it doesn't matter about this. It's just a matter of drawing in the skeleton before you can start adding in the detail. So I'm quite happy with the way this looks. So let's go in and let's start adding a few more details to the shapes. So for the cone, I'm going to keep it quite jaggedy. And for the ice cream, so because we're looking down, the ice cream will kind of take over the top face of the cone. So we're not going to see much of that. And what I've done is I've got myself up a reference image here just to kind of give myself a little bit more detail to work with when adding shading to this ice cream. So it's going to be quite wobbly. And it seems like there's these little tufts that come off. So I'm just going to... So there's our basic shape. So now let's go in and pick our light source. So I'm going to have my light source coming in from this top left-hand corner. Based on the reference images that we created in the lighting demo, let's use that and let's mark in some guides. And with this, we're not trying to create perfectly realistic images. What we're trying to do is get used to understanding how we can visualize something. And then from there, we can break it down into the simple steps of the perspective, the simple shapes, and then add enough value to make it look convincing. So because this ice cream is over the cone, there's going to be a shadow from this cone as well. So I'm just going to add that in. This is all good things to bear in mind. Like imagine something is on top of something. What will happen to the object below it? Now for the ice cream. So we're going to have this section here, much darker. Because the ice cream is a lot lighter, I've gone for vanilla. So the values in itself will be quite lighter compared to the cone. This is the darkest I'm going to go. Good thing with this, because it is ice cream, it doesn't have to be perfect, as there's going to be shapes here and there. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to go in and give this a little smudge. And now for this bottom section. So because we've got our light source coming here, this section here is going to be quite light, but then after this it's going to fall off. So and now what we can do is we can go in and add a little bit of detail. Add some little swirls. Go in and add some chocolate chips if you want. Remember, we're not trying to create a perfect sketch here, we're just learning how to draw. So these little things here is important as we are trying to build up the sketch step by step. And if you are wanting to do a cast shadow, it's going to come down here. So light source is going to be here or so. So then again, we'd have to break this down into its shapes. The ice cream is going to be way off here, but for the cone, we can add in a slight shadow for that. And if you want, you can go in and add a little bit of detail to the cone. But here, so there's our ice cream, and now we're going to move on to the final one, which is the cactus. Okay, so for now for the cactus, so what I've done is, again, I've got myself a reference image just to kind of understand how the cactus looks. So let's go in and build it. So first, I'm going to start off with a plant pot. So this is just a cylinder. Again, I'm going to be looking somewhat a little bit down on this. So let's get into it. I'm going to start by drawing my center line. Okay, so there we have our basic shape for the cactus. Now let's go in and add some details. So now that we're adding the detail, let's go in and add some value. So like in the lighting class, I'm going to have the light coming in from this direction this time. And using the reference images that we created in the lighting demo, I'm going to use this in order to light this. Okay, so there we have the basic cactus. Now I can go in and add some details like the spikes, and then we'll go in and add a cast shadow. So because we've got the light coming in this side, we're going to have the shadow on this side. So remember in the reference images, as you can see here, the shadow goes outwards. So we're going to have it go into the side, but slightly out. Just like so. So here we have our 4 drawings which we've created based on all the information that we've learned in this class. You take as much time as you need with this. As you may have thought that was quite quick of me, but this is something, like I said, I've been doing for a while. So getting used to visualizing, and if you can get yourself some shapes, then please do, because these do come in handy. Just trying to understand form, how you can make more complex shapes and more drawings out of just very simple 3D shapes. So do go in, take as much time. If you want to pause it after each one, please do. But then we'll meet again at the end. Okay, so there you have it. We've gone through the whole class and you've created yourself 4 drawings which you can practice, you can do further, you can post to social media, you can do whatever you want with it, but you've got 4 drawings which you did all by yourself. In the next lesson, I'll be going through what you can do next in order to keep progressing yourself, in order to get your drawing better.